want to take a moment to introduce Dr. Michael Haglund. Dr. Haglund has obtained his MD and PhD from the University of Washington School of Medicine, graduating junior AOA with honors and a PhD in physiology and biophysics in 1987-1988. He then completed a neurosurgery training at the University of Washington, which included a 2-year fellowship in neurobiology at Harvard Medical School and 1 year in Wimbledon, England at St. George's Hospital before completing his training with an epilepsy surgery fellowship. Dr. Haglund was appointed as Assistant Professor of Neurosurgery and Neurobiology at Duke University Medical Center in Durham, and he is since 1995. He currently holds the Distinguished Professorship in Neurosurgery, Orthopedic Surgery, and Global Health. He served as the Surgical Director of the Duke Epilepsy Center from 1995 to 2019, and is the Program Director for Duke Neurosurgery from 2008 to 2019, and since 2020. He received his master's in academic medicine in 2016, always learning, from the University of Southern California, and serves as the Vice Chair of Education and Neurosurgery from 2015 until now. His goal is to create innovative educational applications, including using social learning theory to assess and teach competency-based neurosurgical education with the Surgical Autonomy Program since 2017. Dr. Haglund has also focused on medical missions and global health work over the last 28 years in Ecuador for a decade, and now with a neurosurgical project in Uganda. Since 2007, he has helped lead 23 to 55 medical professionals on 22 neurosurgical camps to Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya, donating over 115 tons of medical equipment and supplies worth over 14 million US dollars, transforming 3 neurosurgical units in Uganda, and founding and serving as the program director for the first ever neurosurgery training program in Uganda. As of January 2023, 12 new neurosurgeons have been trained, including the first 2 women neurosurgeons in Uganda, with 18 more currently training in 2 programs. In 2014, he founded the first ever division of global neurosurgery and neurology in the country, with over 125 members, focusing on traumatic brain injury treatment and research, and developing epilepsy centers of excellence in Uganda. This group, with their Ugandan colleagues, have published over 100 manuscripts together in the last 8 years. Dr. Haglund is a member of the AANS, CNS, and served as a scientific program chair for the 2013 SNS meeting, the ACGME Milestone 2.0 Committee, the SNS Bootcamp Committee, and on the Executive Council of the SNS as a member at large. Dr. Haglund currently chairs the committee of the AANS. Dr. Haglund received the AANS Humanitarian Award in 2015, as well as the Duke University and the University of Washington Humanitarian Awards in 2018. He was also awarded the Distinguished Alumni Award from his alma mater, Pacific Lutheran University, in 2013. Dr. Haglund was appointed as a professor of global health to the Singh Health Duke National University of Singapore Global Health Institute in 2019, with the goal with his Singapore colleagues is to develop and advance neurosurgery in Jaffna, Sri Lanka. With that being said, as you've met so many different people from Harvard Business School, from different sessions, mentors from all over the world this past weekend, Dr. Haglund, I can say, is unequivocally one of the best mentors that I've come across, and he is always available and willing to help and nurture students along this path. And we really appreciate him taking the time out of his day to speak with us. With that, Dr. Haglund, I'm going to stop my share screen and hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. I mean, that was awesome. You almost gave my whole talk, which was great. It'll make it a lot easier for me here. But Han, it's been great. What you guys are doing with this hackathon is truly remarkable. I'm super impressed, and it's one of those grassroots things that just gets a lot of energy, and your team that's leading this has been amazing. Watching what they've been able to accomplish and seeing what's going on this weekend is even more impressive. So I appreciate the time to talk today. I'm going to just go through a little sort of a story of what we've done and to give you kind of a feel. And it kind of goes to what's been going on with the hackathon, in the sense that This is something that started out fairly small, and kind of what I see in this hackathon is one of my philosophies is go big or go home. So I think you'll see in my talk today that we've approached all the things we've done in kind of that manner. This is going to pertain to neurosurgery, but also global surgery. We know that 5 billion people from the Lancet Commission on Surgery lack access to care, and we need about 143 million additional surgeries a year and 2.2 million more providers such as surgeons, anesthetists, or obstetricians. If you look at the world population back in 2007 when I started, and you set the United States to 1, you can see India and China are large. But then if you look at the physicians and keep an eye on the African continent, especially sub-Saharan Africa, you can see it almost falls into the Indian and the Atlantic Ocean. This becomes even more critical when we look at the number of neurosurgeons. So 3,600 neurosurgeons in the US, 565 in Africa. So a huge need in Africa. If you look at the great work that's been done by Key Park at Harvard, looking at the number of neurosurgeons globally, you can see the highest need, sub-Saharan Africa, obviously not the United States and Australia and places like that, but sub-Saharan Africa really stands out. You focus in a little more, the 2 places we've been working, one in Sri Lanka and working many years in Uganda, they're both highlighted here as ones where they have the greatest need. Now, if we look at Africa and divide it into regions, northern, southern, and then the central part, west, central, and east, at the time we started, 486 neurosurgeons were either in the northern African countries like Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, or in South Africa. That left only 77 neurosurgeons for all of sub-Saharan Africa. If you look more specifically at East Africa, they had 270 million people at that time, only 27 neurosurgeons. Many countries didn't even have a neurosurgeon. If you compare one of the northern countries, Morocco, with 32 million people, to Uganda with 30 million, at the time we started, only 5 neurosurgeons in all of Uganda, 171 in Morocco. The ratio of 1 neurosurgeon to 187,000 in Morocco was not that different than the United States, but in Uganda is 1 to 6 million. And the biggest problem is no training programs in Uganda. So as the population gets greater by the day, they don't have a way to train more neurosurgeons. So my philosophy, and the reason I'm doing this is, I met a pastor from a church in Uganda that came to my church in Raleigh, and he invited us to Uganda. And one of my philosophical basis in the Bible is Luke 12:48, which is, to whom much has been given, much more will be required. I've been blessed to grow up in the United States, went to great universities, got to go to a great training program, and now I'm at Duke. So I've been very blessed. And I feel really strongly about giving back. And I think the hackathon fulfills that mission in an amazing way. So I went to Uganda the first time. This was Malago Hospital, 1,500 bed hospital, given by the British at the time of Uganda's independence in 1962, brand spanking new and in great shape. After years of, Idi Amin and corruption and lack and neglect, you can see even the sign Malago Hospital, it's missing the G. When we first went there, it's not in Hawaii, Malawi Hospital, it's in Kampala, Uganda. And this was the recovery room, just 5 trolleys and nothing else. This was the ICU. They had no patients because they had no equipment. This was the OR, which is even more difficult shape. And this is not an anesthesia machine. This is basically a vaporizer. You have to handbag the patient yourself. So people would handbag patients for 6 or 7 hours, and they had no monitoring equipment. They even used ether in some of the ORs, which is like 1930s. And this was the guy that got things going. This gentleman was in a Boda motorcycle accident. He had a subdural hematoma on the brain, was in a coma. They took him to the OR. They handbagged him through the case. They used a hand drill to get through the bone, and a braided wire to cut the bone. And they don't even have a way to stop bleeding on the brain except by laying a piece of gauze on it like you'd lay on your scraped arm, and then peel it off and see if it stopped. The reason I took this photo was he was on the only ventilator in the whole hospital, but no monitoring equipment. And I came back the next morning, and he was gone. Now, if you ever go to Uganda, if they say there's been a little hiccup, that's not anything to do with little, or like you and I might think a hiccup, something really significant happened. And in the middle of the night, the power went out. The generators at Malago kicked on right away, but the nurses didn't notice for about 20 minutes that the ventilator was still set at 0 when the power came back on. So 20 minutes later, he was fixed and dilated, and he passed away that night. Now, just to show you how little things start, this was my notebook from the plane flight back. Now, I'm going to get a hold of Joel, and we need a headlight, we need electric drills, we need a Bovie, bipolar, I don't know how many O2 sat monitors, we definitely need some ventilators. My favorite part about my naivete was we need a long extension power strip to hook everything up. I did know we need step-down generators, but that's about it. So when it came back, the problems clearly were in front of us. One neurosurgeon for 6 million people, no technology, no operating room for neurosurgery, and no training program. So I came up with a solution of 3 T's in research. So the first T was technology. We started a program of placement of life-giving usable surplus, taking surplus from Duke that was in good shape, that had been vetted by our biomed engineers. So if the humidity changed 1%, the monitor didn't go out. You could basically drop things on the floor and they still worked. We talked about twinning. We would take teams of 20 to 50 people and not just make the neurosurgeons better, but take anesthesiologists and OR nurses, ICU nurses, recovery room nurses, biomed engineers to raise everybody's boat at the same time. And then we were going to start a training program. I was the program training director in neurosurgery at Duke. My feeling was we could start a training program there. And then we would do research to develop large research collaborations between Duke and Uganda and other countries, and teach them how to do research so they could improve their own programs. So this is a picture of our first team in August 2007. There's a much younger, no gray hair, Dr. Haglund. Many of these people are from Duke and still work there, like Senthil, one of our PAs. Dr. Zomarodi is one of our really great skull-based surgeons. He was a fellow then. And we worked with their team. And we brought equipment. We brought $1.3 million worth of 9 tons of equipment over there to refurbish ORs, ICUs, and recovery rooms. This is what the recovery room looked like the week before we came, and this is what it looked like the next week. This is what the ICU looked like the week before we came, and this is what it looked like after we were there. And then finally, this is the OR looked like, and this is what it looked like afterwards. Now you can see a drill, a microscope, suctions, IV pumps, proper anesthesia machines, all the monitors. We had Mayfield head holders to hold the skull, bipolars, electric drills to run, cut the bone, and everything they needed to do proper neurosurgery. My favorite comment was the executive director and his associate came down. Basically, all those ORs were like they looked like you saw in the earlier picture. And over the weekend, we set up 1,400 pieces of equipment, 5 operating rooms, a recovery room, the ICU. And he walked into the OR and they said, look, director, we've gone from third world to first world in 48 hours, which they really have. As far as technology, we've done 22 trips, and over those years, we brought in, as Hans said, $14 million worth of equipment and 114 tons of supplies and stuff. We've had great support from our university, from the president of the university, from the director of the Global Health Institute, my own department. We have these philanthropy people that are doing great work with us, and corporate support also. Here's our volunteers. We've had 522 volunteers now. If I went on all 22 trips, I count for 22 of those, but 522 people went, and we've donated over 38,000 hours of time. And then we started the training program. These are the first 2 trainees, Alex Mahindu and Oscar Obiga. They started the program. The next slate was 3 new residents, Blessing, Alex, and the first woman trainee, Juliet, who's amazing. She went over to Toronto Sick Children's Hospital and did a pediatric neurosurgery fellowship. She's amazing. Here's one of my favorite slides. Back in 2022, we had trained 12 neurosurgeons. Now it's up to 14, 18 total for the country. We have 18 now more in training. Our goal is to get to 50, but this is Lawrence Davis from Duke and me. He's the scrub tech. I'm sitting at the end of the table watching Alex Mahindu take out this large medial sphenoid wing meningioma as he just graduated from our training program, and I just sat down there and watched him do the work. Here's our resident cohort in 2010. The second year, we had 5 residents. Now it's up to 18. This is the 8 we could get together that weren't busy traveling or doing other work. This is one of my favorite slides. These are the people that started the program. Myself, Mike Mahamza, unfortunately, and sadly, John Makasa passed away during COVID, and Hussein Sinyanga and Joel Kiribawiri. But this is the future. This is Juliet, Lydia, and Oscar. And what it's all about for me and the team is it's all about relationships. This is me with Juliet when she was in training. These are special relationships we formed with our trainees in Uganda. Now, this is what Uganda looked like in 2007. There was 4 neurosurgeons in the capital city, and Ben Wharf, who's at Harvard as a pediatric neurosurgeon, he went out for 6 years, I think, went into the middle of nowhere in Uganda and set up a pediatric children's hospital with the help of the Cure Foundation that really was the best neurosurgery OR in the country until we showed up and almost got equal with theirs. But Ben Wharf and his group have done amazing work there, especially kind of starting to transfer from low-income to high-income countries in the sense that the things he's done with endoscopic third ventriculostomy have applied now in the United States. Now, in 2016, we added our second site in Mbarara, led by Dr. David Kitcha of Uganda. And we were hoping in 23, but it'll probably be next year. We're going to add our first one in northern Uganda. And the goal is to add several more sites. So by the time we're done in 2030, 50 neurosurgeons would be there. The problem with Uganda is their average age in Uganda is 18. So that means 31 million are above 18, 31 million are below. So they're very fertile. So their population is going to literally more than double from 2007 when we started to 2030. Now, having one neurosurgeon for 1.25 million isn't great, but some of the simple surgeries, general surgeons can be trained, and our goal is to have each neurosurgeon there train 6 general surgeons in a 6-month training program how to do simple neurosurgeries like burr holes and take care of trauma. And that gets us to 350 trauma surgeons for neurosurgery. And that's 1 to 171,000. That meets the Millennium Development Goals and is much like Northern and Southern Africa. So instead of looking like this with 30 million and 5, it'll look like this with 62 million people, but 350 neurosurgeons and 3 training programs so they can keep up. I mean, we actually had to turn away 1 person this year because we ran out of spots for neurosurgery trainees. Now, the fourth part of what we've been doing is research. And I think that's where like the hackathon comes in too. Innovation. How can we apply innovation in these low middle income countries to make a difference? So we focused a little bit on traumatic brain injury and epilepsy. Dr. Sampson challenged me to start something new, and he agreed with me in the go big or go home philosophy. So I said, I'm going to form the first ever division of global neurosurgery and neurology in the whole country. And so we started, and it started with myself, Tu Tran, and Anthony Fuller, 2 graduate students. And then when we started and launched the division, we had about 14 people. But over the last 8 years, it's because of our camps, our training program. We have all these undergraduates working with our group and these Bass Foundation connections where students go over in the summer and do projects. Now we're up to 127 people with 9 faculty members. And when you really look at it, it's a lot of students, medical students, master's students in global health. It's been pretty amazing what's happened over the last 8 years. And just to give you a little feel for the kind of things we've done, Ben Kuhl was a medical student from our Duke Singapore medical school in Singapore, and he did this thing looking at temporal delays after surgery. So imagine you come in with a head injury, and that's the blue. That's how long it took you from the time it happened till you got to the hospital. Now you get admitted. How long till you got a review by the neurosurgeons, and how long it took you to get your CT, and finally, when did you finally go to surgery? So if you look at this, if you have a severe closed head injury, you get to surgery, in probably 10 to 12 hours, which is pretty good. But if you have a moderate closed head injury, you get put on hold for the surgery and you end up waiting a long time before you have your surgery, during which time you may decline. So we started to put a prognostic model in our group led by Tim Dunn and Cyrus and Adil. Cyrus is a really superstar resident at Barrow Neurological, and Adil's one of our neurosurgery residents here at Duke. They did a lot of work with machine learning and predictive modeling. So just to give you an example, simply, if you have 3 data elements, let's say you have male gender, heart rate 130, and a Glasgow coma score of 5, which is that's a severe closed head injury, we can predict that there's a 67% chance that person's going to die. Whenever we put in a lot of other data elements, we could look at this and say, okay, here's the number of patients, but here goes from no chance of a bad outcome to 100% mortality. The yellow is the mild, the orange is the moderate, and the red is the severe closed head injuries. You can see how that breaks out. Well, what happens if you put it in a predictive model with different data variables, and you knew there was a 98% chance this patient was going to die with surgery, and a 94% chance if you managed them without surgery? Well, chances are that patient's not going to do well. But another example would be 98% chance of mortality with no surgery, but only 41% chance if we did do surgery. So this person would be a good candidate for surgery. We can break that down even more if you look at the odds of survival on the y-axis and that probability of a poor outcome on the x-axis. Again, this is no chance of a bad outcome. This is 100% chance of a bad outcome. Then we looked at all the patients we'd collected at Malago Hospital and said, okay, which ones got surgery, which ones didn't? Well, this group, we would say surgery is probably not recommended. You know, their chance of mortality is almost 90 to 100%, but there's still a number of blue dots in here that got surgery. If we look at the other side of the graph, these are surgery patients who all got surgery, even though their chance of survival was 100%. And the problem then is we delay or miss these. These are the people with good chance of survival, but you can see, look at the number of red dots in there that didn't get surgery. Those people are the ones that are going to deteriorate and do poorly because we operated on all those ones with either severe or minor closed head injuries. We also need a way to monitor patients. If you have a head injury in Uganda and you bring your family member to the hospital, they need a CT scan. Many times the public CT scans are down, so you have to go get a private one. It might cost $150. Well, you don't have that money. So you go to your village and you collect 50 cents and $1 and a little bit of shilling here and there, and you can get a CT scan. Okay, great. But in the US, when we do this, we get a CT scan right away, and we write like reflexly, get another one in 6 hours to make sure it hasn't gotten worse, since 20 to 25% of people will deteriorate after their traumatic brain injury. So there's this thing called the infrascanner we've developed with a group in Israel, where you can shine a far infrared light through the skull, and you can find these hematomas, you know, on the brain and watch them as time goes along. We did a study here at Duke that Bobby Grammer, who's now a resident at Mass General, did. He basically slept in the hospital, kind of like you guys have been sleeping on your hackathon work, for about 3 months. And of 503 people that came into the Duke ER, he got an infrascan within 30 minutes of their scans on 500 of them. And he was able to show, and I won't go into the details, but the sensitivity and specificity were very high. False positives were low and false negatives were very low. So the chance of being able to use this in Uganda might be quite good. So we've done a study in Uganda now where we've looked at, now it's up over 800 patients, and it's not as good. So sensitivity is good, but the false positives are kind of high, and we're working on ways to make that better. We've also focused on epilepsy. Our go big or go home philosophy, we screened over 36,000 patients from across the whole country for whether they had epilepsy or not by a questionnaire, and then a more focused questionnaire. And then if they were positive, they were seen by a neurologist and checked to see if they had epilepsy. And we were able to publish a paper and a whole issue of epilepsy and behavior if you're ever interested. Basically, this has 13 articles led by our team. Deb Koltai was the leader, one of our faculty. And we opened up the very first epilepsy center of excellence in Uganda with the help of the people in Uganda, and we've trained them how to use EEGs and take care of patients. Then finally, what's our impact? Well, there was a study published in 2020 on where, in low middle income countries, and had studies been published. And, it shows, obviously not in the US, but in Africa. And, one of my favorites is the highest, we had published about 78 manuscripts then, but the highest number was in Uganda, thanks to our work and Ben Worf's work. And here it is. Here's what we started in 2014, very modestly, but now it's been pretty consistent between 15 and 25 manuscripts a year. We have 41 projects right now we're working on. So it's been very successful, and Tony Fuller and the people on my team are to be congratulated, along with all the medical students and residents, both from Duke and around the country, that are working on this. And finally, we've just started to do some work in Sri Lanka. I'm a professor of global neurosurgery at the Duke Singapore Global Health Institute. And we went there and visited Jaffna. Now, it was a little bit of a stretch. This is like planes, trains, and automobiles. We flew from here to Seattle, 6 hours, Seattle to Korea, 12 hours, Korea to Singapore, 6 hours, Singapore to Colombo, 4 hours, and then the little short 7-hour train ride up north to Jaffna. They have a very good platform there, and they have some money because there's a lot of expatriates that are from that region that have given money to put up hospitals and stuff like that. But there's only one neurosurgeon for 2 million people there, and we want to help work with the country to build up neurosurgery and research there. These are the medical students that came to my talk there. They have a lot of medical students that are very interested in getting involved in research, and that's the exciting part about it. So what are our opportunities? Jump on one of our 41 projects. We have big projects in Uganda, Singapore, Nigeria, and now Sri Lanka. You can join us if, we can set up, if you want to just come visit, you can come to one of our weekly Friday divisional meetings. We meet about 3 to 4 times a month on Fridays, and people are welcome to sit in and see what we do. And if you're a neurosurgery resident, our residents can go for 1 week to Uganda with our camps, or they can go for a whole month. Unlike the military, where it says leave no man or woman behind, we leave them behind for 3 more weeks. And a new thing that's coming out, we're just about to put out the publication for it. You're first to kind of hear about it. We're going to have a 1-year Global Neurosurgery Duke Fellowship for both residents for a year and also for medical students to work with our group. You can stay at your home institution for most of it. We'd expect you here for 2 or 3 months of that time, but we're going to have these medical student fellowships and resident fellowships. And then finally, what a lot of students do in the gap year, we've had many do this, they come to Duke and they get involved in our Duke Global Health Institute Masters of Global Science, and they work with us for those 2 years in between undergrad and medical school. So I really appreciate everybody's time. I'll stop right there. And this was a real awesome opportunity to give a talk to so many people that are really motivated and passionate about doing what you're doing. So I congratulate all of you, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haglund, for sharing all of your experience and the work that you've been doing all around the world. I know, at least for me, I know I've heard some of that from you a little before, but the amount of change and impact that you and your team have made in all parts of the world have really been inspiring. And I will also add that this aspect of networking and growing the people around you to support you on your path in medicine, this is a wonderful opportunity to get connected with that. And so I'm going to pause for a second. If you do have a question for Dr. Haglund, please raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can ask him directly. Start us off with one question, and then we'll go to Noor and then Nicholas. So Dr. Haglund, you talked a lot about increasing capacity and using kind of the resources available to you in America to help and further the exponential increase in resources in the other countries that you are working with. Do you believe that high-income countries and universities and hospital systems can be doing more to model that? And if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, obviously people hear me give this talk. Well, when are you going to come to Burundi? When are you going to come to here? Or people from the US say, well, can you help us here? And I said, I'm glad to advise you. But I said, if you think about it, if every major academic medical center did what we did in just I mean, I don't even have to be a whole country. It could be one city did that. You imagine planting there's 110 neurosurgery programs around the country. You can imagine those 110 academic centers planting a flag somewhere in a country or a city. They could make just a massive impact, right? And all those places obviously have used equipment. All those places have the people necessary to go. It just really takes someone who's passionate about it and someone who can rally the troops, and then hopefully the troops go, because I mean, I get to give this talk, but this talk is not possible without, the 500 volunteers that have gone, to Uganda, and even people that don't go. They pack the equipment, they sterilize the bovies and the bipolars after surgery so we can take them to Uganda. I mean, it's been a team effort all the way from, the first year freshman, undergraduate, or even a high school student in a local high school went to, the president of the university have all been very supportive. So I think if someone can get them to see the light, and then, get the flame lit and it spreads, it can grow pretty fast.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Haglund. With that, I'm going to ask Noor, I know you had your hand up first. Can you please come off mute and turn on your camera and ask a question?
Sure. Thank you so much, Han. And thank you, Dr. Haglund, for the really insightful conversation and for the amazing work that you've done so far. I just wanted to ask, and I think a lot of people will have the same question that I will. How can we, as international medical students or international medical graduates, get involved with some of the projects that you already mentioned, and any type of forms or things that we can apply to so that we can be in touch with you or with your faculty or the projects that you do? Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we don't, there's some things we can't do. Obviously, you can't do a neurosurgery residency fellowship if you're from international, but the point is everybody can get involved if they want. We have a number of we have so many projects that students can get involved in. You saw that one slide. I mean, of our 127 people, I think 100 are, students, residents, graduate students. So there's clearly a way to get involved if you're really passionate about it. My email was on my slides. I think they're recording this, so you could, or we could just give it. It's just my name, michael.haglund@duke.edu. It's very easy. Just send me an email, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you want to do and where you're from. And I mean, we've had international students, like, for example, find a scholarship from their own university to come to Duke for a year or something like that. Or they're participating online. We have a Zoom call every Friday. So, we're glad to have, you listen in and say, you go, oh, I'd really like to get involved in that project. We'll work with you to get you involved in that project. What we care about is people, it's the Angela Duckworth thing. It's grit, right? The grit is passion. Great. You have passion, but there's also perseverance. So if you get involved in a project, we want you to push it through to the end so you can get credit for a publication or 2 or 3 or 4. And you also learn something along the way.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dr.
Thank you so
Haglund.
much, Doctor.
You're welcome.
We're going to go with Nicholas and then Maria. And then, unfortunately, those will be the last 2 questions. So thank you all so much for engaging. We'll go to Nicholas and then we'll go to Maria after that. Go ahead, Nicholas.
Hello, Dr. Haglund. Thank you for the presentation and all the work you've done. It's amazing and inspiring. I look up to people like you every day. And my question is, when you first reached out to the people in Uganda, how did you create trust with them in being able to build the type of infrastructure that you wanted, or like the impact you wanted to have on that community? Were there anything that you used to guide yourself with?
Yeah, I think a couple things. Number one, the trust was the pastor of a church of 50,000 people invited me there. So he was very well known in Kampala. Joel Kiribawiri became one of my best friends in the whole world. And we talked a lot about the problems there. And his dad was the first ever neurosurgeon in Uganda. And he grew up in the guest house at Malago Hospital where his family lived. I think the biggest things I'd say are we're there to help them get better. We're not there to tell them what to do. So, the coolest thing now is they're leading their own. I'll tell you one really quick story. During COVID in 2021, my program director, Beth Baltus, came to me and said, we got this 5 tons of equipment. What do you want to do with it? I go, just send it. You know, we can't go this year because Duke's short of nurses and COVID and all that stuff. So she sent it. A month later, I get an email from the neurosurgery chairman in there, Michael Mahomes, and he says, hey, Prof, just want to let you know we ran a successful camp. And I'm going, how did you run a successful camp without us? Wait a minute, did somebody from Japan or some other country fly in and use all our equipment? You know, what's going on? So I sent him I was a little disappointed, a little hurt, maybe a little upset. So I sent him a nice email. Dear Michael, hey, what happened with the camp? He sends me back, well, Prof, we ran 5 ORs for 2 straight weeks. We did 78 brain tumors, 57 have gone home, and we did it all by ourselves. And, you know, to be honest, when I read that, I like teared up a little bit. I was going, oh my gosh, not only have we given them the man and the woman a fish in Uganda, they've taught themselves how to fish. They did it all on their own. You know, when we first went there, they had 4 neurosurgeons and no residents, and now they have 14 neurosurgeons and 18 residents. So they ran the camp all by themselves, and that's really exciting. And the critical mass is there, and the younger residents who are graduating, the 3 I showed you in that one slide, Oscar and Juliet and Lydia and some of the others, they're building this up, you know, into something that's going to be amazing. I think we've reached critical mass, and, you know, I don't know that our work there is completely done, but it's getting close.
Thank you so much.
That's so inspiring, Dr. Haglund, to hear you talk about the fact that, you know, over those 15 years of putting all that work in, now that sustainable efforts that you all have made are, you know, bearing fruit, and so many people are being able to benefit from it. Thank you.
Our next goal is we're going to try to build a neurosurgery hospital wing off in Mbarara that's going to have like neurosurgery ICUs, CT scanners, step down beds, and teaching conference rooms down in Mbarara that'll hook right into the hospital and the ORs kind of thing. So that's our new big, go big or go home thing.
Love it. Love it. And with our final question, Maria, you can come off mute and ask your question.
Hi, thank you, doctor. I'm a doctor from Venezuela, and I think your work is really impressive. My question is really very simple. You mentioned a prototype of avoiding that a patient needed to get a CT scan right away. That's still a prototype, or is something that is in the market already? Because I think it will be really helpful in my context. Thank you.
Yes, yes, that is available right now. The infrascanner is available. We don't know that it's vetted yet for perfect clinical care. I think, you know, this is something that could be used at, you know, district hospitals to see if there's some kind of blood clot. What we're trying to use it for is once we have a baseline CT, then instead of trying to get another CT every time they change, we could hopefully follow the blood clot. Did it get bigger? And that's why they're getting sleepy, or they just get sleepy because we woke them up every hour for the last 2 days. So yes, it is something that's commercially available, but I don't know that it's quite ready for prime time. But there are studies being done. We have a research grant that's doing studies around the world with that infrascanner. And so, yes, that is possible to get involved with that kind of thing.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. With that, Dr. Haglund, thank you so much for joining us today and for being our keynote speaker. We hope to involve you with many more Mission Brain activities in the future. I believe